Senator Loftus, I'm glad to see you here tonight. When I arrived at the South Carolina Senate, I was number 46. And William Timmons was there, and he was number 45. And so affectionately, that's how I always referred to Congressman Timmons as number 45. It's my pleasure tonight to be with you and to introduce a friend, Dr. Matt Clark, who is the chairman of the board of Personhood, South Carolina. I met Dr. Clark in 2013 when I was running a Senate campaign against Lindsey Graham. Met Dr. Clark down at Edgefield and discovered we had some things in common. We both attend Presbyterian Church. Of course, he's the pastor of one, I'm just a member. We both have 8 children by our first wives. Since then, however, Dr. Clark has gone up and above the call of duty. He also has 3 adopted children. Now, I know Greenville is a great pro-life town. They're just putting the finishing touches on an 8,000 square foot pregnancy care center down on Grove Road, across the street from the largest, unfortunately, the largest human killing center in the state. And I feel like God is going to honor that work of faith. I believe that killing center one day is going to be no more, and I hope and pray that it will be sometime soon. How many of y'all have been to see the movie Unplanned? Well, I want to encourage the rest of you to go and see it, because it will light a fire under you, if you do not already have a fire under you, to bring an end to the killing of unborn human babies. In 2015, I founded Personhood, South Carolina, to do just that. To protect legally and constitutionally every human life from the moment of conception until natural death. I asked several people to be a part of the board of directors, and I asked Dr. Matt Clark to be the chairman of the board. In 2016, I went down to the State House as a volunteer lobbyist for Personhood, South Carolina. And I want you to know this is not some recent effort. Personhood legislation in this state has been introduced every session since 1998. It just keeps getting put off. So that is why your sticker, if you have one on tonight, says Personhood Now. Not Personhood 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or another 20 years from now, but Personhood Now. Well, I resigned from the board when I was elected to the state senate, and I've been so blessed and honored to see the work that Dr. Clark has carried on. I want you to know that he has a full-time practice as an allergy doctor. He's also bivocational. He's a pastor. And he's doing this on a volunteer basis on top of all that. He's a man of faith and hard work. He's a prayer partner and a friend. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Matt Clark.
Well, Richard's a dear friend. I'm so thankful to be here with y'all tonight. I'm appreciative to the Greenville County GOP for allowing us to have a few minutes. And, you know, Richard's a state senator, so I'm going to take his advice. He said 5-8 minutes, kind of Senate time. So work with me here, okay? I've got a few things, important things to say that I hope we'll kind of be able to connect. You know, my daughter, she's 7 years old. She gets this. It's not complicated stuff. It's a really clear message. Our president said, did he not, in the State of the Union, that we were all made in the holy image of God, right? It's very simple. It's a clear message. All of us are made in God's image. And really the question for us is, will we have the courage to be consistent with that clear message? The Personhood Act of South Carolina in the House is 3920, and the Senate is 485. That's real simple. Personhood movement aims to restore equal legal protection for every single baby in South Carolina, beginning at conception without exception. The bill says that the right to life vests at fertilization for all preborn and born children. It's a very simple piece of legislation designed to end abortion once and for all in our state. The scriptures teach us that God has made us in his image. We all know this, don't we? We also know from modern science that a new life begins at conception. It's very clear. And when we look at our legal history, we know that the unalienable right to life exists right there in our founding documents. So we know that the Supreme Court, we know this, don't we? In 1973, y'all, let's say it together, they were dead wrong. The Supreme Court was dead wrong. And so personhood, we see this, we understand what's been happening since then. And since those rights were stripped away from those preborn children, did you know that there's around 60 million of your neighbors who've been killed inside the womb in our great nation? And can we be a great nation for much longer if we keep this up? In 2017, I know this is heavy, I see your faces. In 2017, 5,112 South Carolinians, babies inside the womb in our state, lives were snuffed out by abortion. Now that cruel decision, we know it violated God's word, it violated scientific reality, and it violated the United States Constitution. What are we going to do about this? Well, I'll tell you, the South Carolina GOP platform is very encouraging in this regard. In fact, I posit to you that the Personhood Act of South Carolina is the only piece of legislation that actually seeks to express every single aspect of the South Carolina State GOP platform, if you look at it very carefully. So we're thankful to see that the platform calls for the reversal of Roe v. Wade and legislative efforts meant to trigger that action. And that's what we're doing. You see, we aim to bring this evil to an end. The personhood movement does not exist within the framework of Roe v. Wade. We do not do this. We do not make efforts to regulate abortion within Roe v. Wade. We reject Roe v. Wade. We say it was decided wrongly, and we make laws that are intentionally contrary to it so that the state of South Carolina can tell the federal government they were wrong, and we can do right in our state. Personhood South Carolina does one thing, we're laser focused. We only promote legislation that seeks to reverse and ignore Roe v. Wade. That's all we do. Now, all Christians know their Bibles, teach them about how we human beings, we're the crowning act of God's creation. We're not like animals. Right? I see your eyes. You're connecting, like I mentioned my daughter. You're like, yeah, my daughter gets this too. We're not like the animals. We're made to enjoy God. And that's the essence of what it means to be made in his image. Did you know that? That's what it means to be a person. We talk about personhood. The reason we're persons is because God made us to have a personal relationship with him. Unlike the animals, we're the crowning act of God's creation. And through the work of Christ, we can all be restored to friendship with God and find forgiveness. So, listen, when that abortion plant crushes another baby to death, it's not just an attack on one of your neighbors. It's not just an attack on human right to life. It is an attack on God and his plan for this world. You understand that? This is a joyful and wondrous relationship that we're meant to have with God. And abortion is an attack on that. And any society that persistently refuses to protect these precious babies, it's true, has surely lost any hope of blessing from God. Y'all, the Supreme Court of the United States of America has set itself up against the God of creation. And I ask you, who's going to win that battle? And so we must work with all of our Christ-like skill and knowledge and wisdom to see their evil 1973 ruling completely undone. That's what we have to do. That's why I'm here tonight. Senator Cash mentioned lighting a fire. I know many of you don't agree with this. I've seen the stats from Winthrop. I know that maybe 20 to 30% of you in this room are really in agreement with all the tenets of personhood. I hope you'll open your mind and your heart to these ideas tonight and reconsider your position and join in the personhood movement. You see, even an entry-level student of science knows that life begins at conception. The unique genetic material comes together at conception. And from that moment forward, the DNA inside that individual is causing this internally self-directed process, choreographed by their own DNA, to lead to the production, growth, and development of a new human being. All that human being needs is shelter and nourishment and safety. The same thing that's needed by any child outside the womb. And so when the Supreme Court announced this silly viability argument, it really doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you got your PhD today, right? Congratulations, right? Well, what if you were out in the desert and you had no water and no food and no clothing and you were surely going to die? Would it be okay for us to just kill you? Of course not. Even though you're not viable in that situation. And so that viability argument, y'all, it's nonsense. It ignores the scientific evidence that's in place. So the Supreme Court, they're not only up against the God of creation, they're also acting contrary to modern science. Finally, our founders established these truths in our founding documents. The Declaration of Independence says that we are each endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men. Do you hear that word? Unalienable. Our elected officials and our governor, their job is to see to the securing of these rights, not the distributing of these rights. They don't decide which babies have these rights. All babies have these rights. Their job is to secure these rights. When the Continental Congress penned those words in 1776, I'll tell you a man named William Blackstone. He was the leading legal scholar, his commentary at that time. And in his commentary it said, an infant in the mother's womb is supposed in law to be born. What this means is that our founders, the people who wrote this document, they understood that every legal right held by a person outside the womb is also held by a person inside the womb. This is not news. They understood this. They got this. The authors of the 14th Amendment, that amendment that the Supreme Court used to find this imaginary, foundational, fundamental right to privacy that supposedly includes abortion. Did you know that that very amendment, written in the 19th century, was written by a Congress that simultaneously was passing, listen now, super tough, strict anti-abortion laws on federal territories in the West? That same exact Congress that they claim created some kind of imaginary fundamental right to privacy that included abortion. So to think that the 14th Amendment, that Blackmun court, if they really looked at the history, they would know there's no way that it was in the original meaning of that amendment. So what do we do from this? Well, Roe v. Wade not only sets us up against God and against modern science, but clearly that court failed in its fundamental duty, which is to interpret the United States Constitution. Y'all, the Supreme Court was dead wrong. And I love what Senator DeMint said. He mentioned the 10th Amendment. He mentioned the right of the states to hold on to things that belong to us. So what are we going to do? Are we going to pass legislation that ends this? Well, now I'm actually going to get to what's the most controversial part of this. And it's very heavy. I apologize to have to bring it up in some regards, but it has to be discussed. Why do we say without exception? Well, isn't it obvious the divinely endowed and unalienable right to life cannot be arbitrarily removed, but only according to due process of law? Think about it. Isn't equal protection supposed to be for every person? Isn't it clear that legislators and governors, as I've said, exist to secure rights, not distribute rights? Now look, I'm about to share some conclusions with you, and I want to grant that these are deeply difficult situations. Honestly, I hate to mention it in a mixed crowd. But we have to talk about it because 5,112 babies were killed in South Carolina in 2017. We conclude that the circumstances surrounding a child's conception cannot strip that child of its right to life. Think about that. If that's your position, think about it. Two rights do not make a wrong. We say punish the rapist, not the child. And why is it acceptable to allow a child to be killed because of the crimes of its father? You know that doesn't make any sense. You know, maybe there's been some painful things that you or others that you know have been through, and there's a lot of emotion as you're hearing this, but if you can just set that aside and think about the reality of that baby and its right to life. We conclude that a child's level of health or disability cannot be used to strip that child of its right Why is it acceptable to kill a child who has a shorter than expected lifespan or a lower level of health and functioning? Now, I know these are very emotional and difficult things to discuss, but you know what? The underlying assumption there is that abortion is actually going to help that mother. And that's something else we have to talk about. It actually doesn't help the mother. Study after study has now shown that abortion harms women. The rate of emotional and physical suffering in women who have had abortions is through the roof in these areas compared to women who have not had abortions. I want to tell you, abortion not only kills a child, it harms the mother. I've seen this, I've spoken to them, I've seen the evidence, I've read the studies. Abortion does not help women. It is not a compassionate thing to suggest that to a woman. And in South Carolina, we have the safe haven law. So any woman who has a child, she can take that child to maybe a fire station or a police station and drop that baby off, in the state of South Carolina. We'll take custody of that child, and there'll be no charges, no questions asked. Adoption's a great option, as you know. I believe that. So we have all kinds of good things we can do to help these babies and help these women. You see, the path of cherishing life, it's something it's very hard. It's not just an academic thing, it's actually really hard, and it hurts. And the path of life actually sometimes looks like, and feels like the path of death, but it's not. You go through the valley, you go through the shadow, and on the other side, you find the blessings. And that's what we have to be saying as the people in our state. We have to be going out and helping and supporting those through those others who are in through those valleys. So, look, I hope you will join us. That's why I'm here tonight. I hope you will join the Personhood effort. I hope you'll go to our website, personhood.sc, www.personhood.sc. I hope you'll pick up both of our palm cards tonight that we have for you. It goes through all the action items that you can do to get involved politically. There's a really good one you can give to your pastor. Get your pastor and your church involved. It would be really powerful to see this grassroots movement growing. And it is growing. We're seeing our network growing not only in our state but nationally, week by week, year by year. We would like for, here at the GOP, Greenville GOP, we'd like for y'all to reach out to Drew McKissick and ask him to bring this before the state executive committee and have it brought up as something to endorse by the state executive committee. And perhaps the Greenville County folks could consider that as well. So we're really thankful for the time to be here tonight, thankful for your attention.